Let's check our YouTube live stream here. I'm just doing it live, well, just because we can't, right?
Yeah. Because we could go back at a later time and redo sections that we don't like.
Yeah. And then I think people appreciate being able to hang out while we're streaming.
Yeah.
All right. Let me just double check our audio, but everything should be fine. And I will be editing, so don't worry about that. And I will be editing, so don't worry about that. All right, Ralph, say hello for a second, and then.
Hello, this is Ralph.
Okay, thanks. And I will be editing. All right. Be interesting if any subscribers hop on. If you see a third name, that's just me. So. Okay, and let's see. All right, we should be good to go here. I'm going to send my live stream to somebody real quick. That way they can monitor it for me. Like my typewriter keyboard. Okay. All right. So I'm sure we have maybe like a viewer or two, but eventually. So if anybody's watching and wants to participate in our conversation via chat, by all means, say hello and ask questions. And if I believe it's appropriate to bring up in the discussion, I will definitely respond to you and bring it up into the chat. And so I'm just going to quickly introduce here. And all right, so hi everyone, my name is Brandon Laws, and here with me today is Ralph Pittle, an attorney of 40 years, retired now, but has successfully served our country very well in the tardive dyskinesia community, tardive akathisia community, amongst other things as well, which we'll get into. We don't have a specific discussion that we're going to talk about at the moment, but I know that Ralph, you and I always find something to talk about, so I wasn't too worried about it. And I'm streaming here on YouTube and Rumble as well, and if anybody wants to ask questions, they can. But before we get started, I just want to mention one thing: is to anybody that doesn't know what tardive dyskinesia or akathisia is, it doesn't matter if you don't, because this may apply to you regardless, because tardive dyskinesia and tardive akathisia are conditions that you could potentially be at risk for experiencing due to the way the industry is developed, to where a prescription medication may be given to you, whether it's metoclopramide or a psychiatric medication or even some antibiotics, or you could even be in the ER and be given some of these medications and be at risk of these conditions. So for the general public that's watching, I want you to hopefully take a listen in to hear what we have to say, because there's a chance that this could potentially affect you or your family as well, and not just the community that we have access to right now, the tardive dyskinesia and akathisia community. It's much, much bigger than that. This will be a scandalous industry in general discussion, and but we will probably talk specifically about akathisia and tardive dyskinesia. And so with that being said, I have somebody that's become a good friend of mine. His name's Ralph Pittle, and he just so happens to be a retired attorney with a lot of experience that most people don't have. And not only that, he had a wonderful wife, and his stories are absolutely incredible to hear and just comforting and good to just relax to. And if he couldn't top it off, he somehow just so happened to be in the lab with Leo Sternbach, where all these psychiatric medications and drugs were developed. And so Ralph goes back quite a distance, and I think you guys will find it interesting what he has to say and to just hang out. So I hope you guys enjoy what we've got going on. All right, so Ralph, is there anything in particular that's on your mind? I'm sure I have some notes, but I figured, knowing you, you're so passionate about what you've done over the years and you've witnessed so many things. Is there anything that you would like to discuss specifically regarding tardive dyskinesia or akathisia that's maybe been on your mind recently? And if not, I'll open up some notes here and we'll go from there.
Well, first, thank you for the generous introduction, Brandon.
Yeah, sure.
And what I'd like to do to begin is start off the conversation by telling anyone who's listening or interested a little more background on who I am and how I ended up working on these matters of interest to the American public.
Yeah, I think that'd be great for you to do that.
So for starters, my name is Ralph Pittle. It's spelled P like Paul, I double T like Tom, L-E. Going back to grade school, the name Pittle would often bring kidding and laughter from classmates. My father said to me, well, if you're troubled with, because more often than not, I mean, almost always, if I said Ralph Pittle and asked you to send me something, it would come addressed to Ralph Pittle, Piddle. So when I, as a young man, told my father that when the teacher introduced me and I said my name, other kids made fun of me and would always put D's in my name if they said anything to me. So I developed a habit that whenever I say hello, I say Ralph Pittle, Pittle. Otherwise, I'm going to see it differently.
Hey, at least you introduce with your name. Some people like to introduce with their diet or their religion and not their names. Hi, I'm a vegan, or hi there, I'm an all meat eater. We've met people like that.
Well,
I've fallen victim to that myself, to be honest. Or hey man, I'm from California.
Well, to pick up on what you said about things that I've done over the course of my professional career, it started out when I graduated high school at Columbia High School in South Orange, New Jersey. My family had moved to South Orange when I was a teen, and I've lost our contact. So, oh, there you go. Maybe I need to.
I might be adjusting, so you're going to see some things change a little bit. Like maybe we don't need to do it that way. I'm going to just go back to the duos and just have it both of us this way. Let's just go back. It'll be fine.
That's
I was thinking, yeah,
that's good. That's good. And I like you on that side, but you want a little bit more this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's better this way. I appreciate
So from high school, I applied. Way before high school, I should go back there.
it. Sure.
I started working in the pharmaceutical industry when I was 14 years old. Um, my grandmother got her prescriptions from a little pharmacy in Irvington, New Jersey. It was a two-bus ride from junior high. And my dad had said to me, while he was struggling with businesses that he had been creating.
So you paused up here for a second, which is
Oh,
interesting because we've been on for an hour and haven't had any issues. Hey, Ralph, so are you back now by any chance?
I can see a split screen. I can see
All right.
you.
You're back. So you were talking about high school and how you were working in pharmacy, and then for some reason the internet decided to become our enemy. But you should be back, I hope. Why would it be cutting out? Because we were fine earlier. Unless it's on my end, but that wouldn't make much sense.
I hear you now, but you seem frozen for a bit.
So I need to check my stream on my phone because for some reason I'm not hearing anybody now. I don't know if it's him or I. Stream on my phone. So is that me cutting out? For some reason I'm not hearing it.
I don't know, but I see you. I see you and I hear you.
Okay, I'm getting a message that it's going on and off. It looks like we're back, I hope.
Okay.
It's the internet. It's definitely not us, though, I don't think. Okay. Let's try this for one more. Yeah, let's just keep going again. Okay, so you were working in a pharmacy before high school, correct?
Right. My father was fighting with people who had stolen money from his business that put him into bankruptcy, and my father said that if I would get a job, then he wouldn't have to pay me an allowance. And it occurred to him that the pharmacy where my grandmother got her drugs, 2 bus rides away from South Orange Junior High, would give me a job. And I started in the pharmaceutical industry with the glorious job of tearing up cardboard boxes.
Yep. And we had a brief discussion of that. So
yeah,
you had some.
Then
did you declare wonderful while doing that? Is that when the
no. That concept. I mean, I was at that time in my life probably a lot more insecure, but those kind of things came later.
Oh, okay.
But I after working in pharmacy for my grandmother's, not that she owned it, but she got her drugs there, and she lived a couple of blocks away. So I would take buses to work, and my father would pick me up on his return from work and I would deliver the prescriptions to my grandmother, and then he would take me home. And in high school, my particular high school romantic interest was in a high schooler in a different. I was in the Columbia High School, and the woman that I met was at Livingston High School, and And her father was the manager of a larger drugstore in East Orange, New Jersey. So I moved up to a more significant job, and a part of everything that I'm doing, um, almost from grade school, has been political. My While I was in high school, I worked for the John Kennedy campaign, and at the East Orange store that my girlfriend's father owned. Part of my job, in addition to now working the register and things like that, but I was the delivery boy. And when people called in to a store that would deliver their prescriptions, when the pharmacist had it ready, I would call the patron and say, "Hi, Mrs. Burns. I've got your prescriptions ready. I'm going to bring them over. Is there anything I can bring you from the store while I'm on the way?" And of course, the customers appreciated that, and so now I'm walking around with my support Kennedy button, and I would deliver their prescriptions and whatever else they asked me to bring along. And when possible, I would usually initiate a conversation about, "Are you registered to vote?" So that started kind of young in my career, and I applied to go to the University of Michigan College of Pharmacy in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My guidance counselor said, "Ralph, why don't you try Rutgers University right here in Newark? I think you'll have better success there," which was the last thing I wanted to do. It was time to go to college. I didn't want to live at home with my parents. I wanted to, you know, get into life. And to my counselor's surprise, I got accepted to University of Michigan, and headed out in that direction, arriving just a couple of months after President Kennedy gave his Peace Corps address at the University of Michigan Student Union doorsteps, with a plaque on them now, all these years later. So, from my perspective, what an exciting new step in my life. Um, and while or after completing pharmacy school, I graduated and passed the New Jersey Pharmacy Board of Examination for pharmacy students by interning at a hospital pharmacy in Newark, New Jersey, Presbyterian Hospital. And when I was offered the job from the head pharmacist, because I had also applied to other hospital pharmacies, I asked the pharmacist if he would allow me to spend a few hours every week doing research on drug-induced injuries, so that I could publish bi-monthly a newsletter for the hospital nursing and physician staff to identify any new information found in published literature that suggested drug dangers with particular drugs, which were new evidence and not generally known by the pharmacy community.
So is that like kind of interesting? do you go through the FDA to find these reports, or where would these reports be coming from?
Well, I would go to, I would look at what we had on our hospital formulary and what doctors were prescribing. And basically, I would go to the internet and Google for information. Well, we didn't have Google then, so that's an overstatement. But I would be able to get into the. We did have a healthcare library in the hospital, so I was able to go up to the healthcare library, and the librarians would help me find new information about drug injuries. And so twice a month, I published a little handout for the entire staff with any new information I got about any particular drug that was showing up as a potential problem. And so I completed a year of internship as required, and I then passed the New Jersey pharmacy internship requirement. You had to go to the pharmacy school. Actually, you went to the Rutgers school, I think, where they had classrooms set up for an exam that would take a couple of hours to do, and you would write answers to posed questions, and I did end up passing that. So then I knew that I was going to be heading down and I've completed pharmacy now, and I was going to be heading to Washington, D.C., where I was accepted at the American University Washington College of Law. When I got there, my younger brother, Dr. Lester Pittle, and by the way, if you want to think about name identity issues, I was Ralph Pittle, and they always spelled it with D's. My brother was Les Pittle. So imagine the challenges that he had.
So was he the lesser Pittle? Were you the greater Pittle and he's the lesser Pittle?
Well, he was the younger Pittle, and his first name was Lester. So he was in that sense, humorously, he was Les Pittle. But when I got to DC to attend American University Washington College of Law, I went to the dean and said, this is reported to be a very excellent law school. Indeed, it was the first law school that was initially a woman's law school only. And I said to the dean, what if you want to go on after law and be a trial lawyer? We don't have any training in law school to be a trial lawyer. And I told him that my brother was in medical school. He hadn't graduated yet, but he was given case assignments with mentors that would oversee him. He would go to community clinics. He would work up patients and tell the treating doctor, well, I think this patient has this, or that, and that what we should do is the following. And the mentor would either say, yes, that's a good idea, or no, you better think about that. So that's how you learn. You learn by doing things and making mistakes, but being supervised so that the patients are adequately cared for. And I got a grant. I actually, there was a federal program that gave me a partial grant, and I got an NGO to add some additional money, and I had my civil process professor, who was my favorite professor, be the supervisor for law students in court. And 11 of my classmates, third year students, who wanted to get the experience of actually practicing law, um, came on board with me. But ultimately, the school got the Washington, D.C. Bar Association to allow us to go to court on behalf of tenants who were living in slum landlord buildings where the landlords weren't providing the services that the tenants were paying for. Sometimes their roof might leak, or their electricity was out, or their plumbing didn't work, and so we were able to go to the tenants who were mostly reside. They were almost entirely black and brown people who were living in that part of Washington, D.C., that had a lot of drug use, a lot of crime, the kind of things that all of our poorer communities in this country were experiencing and are still experiencing today. Poor people are not getting the health care that they need. And this is something that I've helped to develop a program that would enable tenants in slum landlordville to hold landlords accountable and make them repair or improve the situation that deprived them from the services they were paying for and not receiving.
I was actually living in an apartment in Pontiac, Michigan. Probably not the greatest place. I had two decisions on where to live. I just talked about this in a vlog that I'll be uploading. I had an option to live in Waterford, Michigan versus Pontiac, Michigan, and I chose Pontiac for some reason. Don't ask why. But the apartment was making me sick, and I didn't really know why. And one day, my roommate opened up the closet that I never needed to use because I had plenty of room in my closet. So there's like a closet next to the door of the entrance of the apartment, and the whole wall was just completely black, full of black mold. And I realized years later that I probably should have filed a lawsuit or at least got in contact with an attorney for that. That apartment made me so ill, it was unbearable with the cleaning chemicals and all the cooking smells and whatever else had ever gone in those apartments before me. Really knocked me on my butt, and especially that mold must have done a lot. It wasn't until I got a HEPA filter with a carbon filter on it that I started feeling a little bit better there and was able to survive. But yeah, now that I think about it, I probably should have called an attorney, shouldn't I have?
Well, I mean, I think that
We
you
told them about it too eventually, and they didn't really address it for weeks. And that was
and
black
how,
mold.
how did they address it when after weeks later they did?
I don't even think I was living there until they addressed it, to be honest with you. They might have
Mhm.
taken their time. Yeah. And then like
Well,
some of the patchwork in the bathroom that they would do was just kind of butchered, and my roommate's like, "Can I just do it? I'm a handyman. I can do this much better." And the guy's saying no, and my friend is trying to figure out how to do it himself, and so it's just butchered work there, and just not very good. And so that's a
well,
impoverished place to be living in, I guess.
well, I wouldn't fault yourself for failing to take legal action because the whole concept of holding people accountable for civil wrongdoing um, today is not adequately understood by the American public, because here I'll jump to the end, so to speak. Research that you've done and research that I've done, and data that we've looked at from the FDA, the American Psychiatric Association, um, and a number of other sources, tells us that in the United States today, there are 600,000 people or more with tardive dyskinesia.
That's just
And,
tardive. That's not counting all the
yeah,
other medication side effects that could be going
right,
on.
right. I hadn't gotten to that. That's just the tardive dyskinesia, and that pays no attention at all to the kind of side thing that you're afflicted with, akathisia,
Correct. Yeah.
long term akathisia, um, and so all all of these people, maybe a million people with tardive dyskinesia or tardive akathisia symptoms, um, have no treatment, because 60% of the time, if you develop either of these drug-induced neurological symptoms, they're with you for life. They don't go away, and so we're talking about a million people suffering the disease. But what happens is, let me start first with tardive dyskinesia.
Yeah.
Sufferers become unable to articulate their thoughts, their views, their feelings, because they have involuntary, abnormal movement of their tongue, or their jaw. Sometimes one of my clients, in fact, one of my first, um, could not stop grinding his teeth and ultimately ground them to the gums. And of course, it made his relationship with his wife more than just a little challenging. So if we've got a million people who are physically injured, um, um, almost all of them will have at least one close person in their family who is now no longer able to communicate with them.
And then one of the issues is that I've noticed while you're speaking about not communicating is that even if the individual knows that they're injured, let's say that they're aware that they're injured, they may not even reach out to an attorney, or they try, like I tried, and it doesn't go anywhere when they deserve to be compensated for their injuries. So this is where I'd like to mention, wanting to just general listeners, is that if you see a family member with a side effect of these medications that's kicking in, maybe some off chance that one of your family members is grinding their teeth and you realize that it could be medication, you need to contact an attorney, even if you're not entirely sure of a lawsuit at the yet, and find out eventually if there is a lawsuit. The attorney might even make a recommendation of going to see neurologists or other doctors to investigate the symptoms further. So if somebody's unable to speak for themselves, even the Bible says to speak up for people that can't speak for themselves, and I believe that's in Proverbs. And so I would really encourage you guys to speak up for people. If you see somebody harmed, whether it be a friend or family member or just somebody close in your life, speak up, because there's billions of dollars sitting there for lawsuits. I'm sure you can agree with that, Ralph, from some cases that you've done, is that there's genuinely billions of dollars that could be compensated to people out there that they're not even aware of, because there's so many injured people. And that's what I want the world to know, is that there's a lot of money. I don't know the specific number of how much money could be compensated, but it's a lot.
Well, before you get to money and lawsuits, I would like to add another layer to this.
Yeah, always.
what Brandon said is correct. That more often than not, indeed, way more often than not, people who develop tardive dyskinesia, it might be the incessant tongue darting, it could be the grinding of the teeth, it could be movements of the fingers and the hands. Um, but it's well documented that the sufferer, the drug induced sufferer, will not realize that she or he is making abnormal movements until someone close who sees them on a regular basis would say to them, Brandon, why do you keep on sticking your tongue out? Or whatever it is, the abnormal involuntary movement that the patient is doing, but is not aware that the patient is doing it. So the literature is real secure on that, that way more often than not, if you start to develop tardive dyskinesia or tardive akathisia, you won't know it unless someone brings it to your attention.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was looking back at some live streams that I did on my YouTube channel, just of me just hanging out with my subscribers when I got injured. I was so doped up on a benzodiazepine that it's like I was aware of it, but I didn't realize how bad. It was like somebody on alcohol. It's like they know they're drunk, but they don't know much more than that. And so I'm like speaking coherently, but you could tell that there was something pretty off about me. And I was noticing, looking back, it's like, wow, those were side effects of the benzo, essentially making me intoxicated. But not only that, clearly the akathisia was getting involved. And I even mentioned in the videos, I'm like, yeah, I punched a hole in my wall or something like that. But I don't know. It wasn't enough awareness at the time until later that we fully understood it. And somehow
Well,
doctors don't see that stuff, right? It's just ridiculous.
well, yeah. I mean, I could see how it was really difficult for you, and it is correct that doctors very frequently, most of them don't see it, they don't recognize it, and that's because of what the pharmaceutical companies did. They never adequately told doctors, if you're going to use any of this large group of drugs, maybe 40 or more different drugs that can cause tardive dyskinesia, there is an appropriate medical protocol before you'd ever, a doctor who's been adequately informed, would ever put a patient on these drugs. I mean, they do have some useful benefits. And if you're and they're intended for short-term use. If you're talking about the drug Reglan, which is generically known as metoclopramide, that is prescribed without doing any pre-prescription evaluation. What must happen? Well, the doctor should do, and eventually the American Psychiatric Association published guidelines for the use of antipsychotic drugs, but the guidelines were suppressed for years by the economics of big pharma.
So there were guidelines for the Reglan as well, right? Not just the
yes, yeah. Well, what there were for Reglan was they lied about it. They said that like all antipsychotic drugs, Reglan causes abnormal involuntary movements, quote, but those are comparatively rare, close quote.
And what I'm discovering, I'm going to cut you off here for a second and we'll get back to it. I talked to the Akathisia Alliance for Education and Research a little bit. Jill from the organization, she has people that have akathisia fill out these forms on her website of their symptoms and which medications that they took. And she's noticing that it's typically Reglan, metoclopramide, that's giving people akathisia. And so she hasn't published publicly yet, but I'm sure that she has nothing against me telling people that it's Reglan. And then there's actually a child, he was about, I think maybe like 12 years old. I'll do a video on it eventually. And he developed akathisia in his legs, cat running by. So this child, he was having akathisia in the ER because he had a migraine, and the mother wanted him to have some pain meds or something for it. And so the nurse gave him a cocktail of medication, which just so happened to have Reglan in it. And so a single dose of Reglan gave her son akathisia to where it was basically the end of the world for him in the moment. And I know exactly what that feels like. I have it way too often still. Even if it's just once a month, it's still too much. But and then it ended up in his legs and everything else. And there was no warning for them. And by the time the mother found out and said, wanted her son off the drugs, it was too late. It was already in. Like, so I don't even know, like, what are the solutions to ERs? Are they supposed to be doing these physical evals too with Reglan and these other cocktails of medications? And then,
Well, what they're supposed to do is be aware that even short-term use of metoclopramide or any of the antipsychotic drugs requires warning that this will help your immediate circumstance. For example, a fellow that I represented for a while had a unsatisfactory meal at a Mexican restaurant.
we should talk about that, by the way.
Pardon?
We should absolutely get into that at some point, by the way, in this stream.
Yeah, but when he went to a local medical center, and they his symptoms here: I'm nauseous, I'm vomiting, I just had this meal. I won't tell you the name of the restaurant chain, but it's a big one. And so they injected metoclopramide intravenously, but you shouldn't do that. What the studies have shown is that an intravenous push, where they put the needle in and shoot you whatever amount of metoclopramide they're giving you, the likelihood of developing tardive dyskinesia is 5 times greater if they just do an IV push, when what should be done is they should put the metoclopramide in an intravenous saline drip and drip it in slowly over a 5-minute period or longer. And there's documented evidence that that will make it less likely to develop tardive dyskinesia.
And I hope there are nurses listening to that, nurses and doctors, to be aware of that. And I'm sure they can do a simple Google search to find that as well. I'm sure the resources are out there. Ideally, it should be a drip. And then another benefit of being using a drip, unless it's like an extreme emergency, life and death emergency, the benefit of a drip is that if somebody starts getting sick, they can cut the line. They can cut it and be like, okay, something's going on with the medication, let's cut it. But if you do a direct push, it's too late immediately. The symptoms are there, and then they have to deal with the symptoms. But if you go slow, you can say that there's symptoms. So an example for me was that I don't even remember what the medication was. It was a pain medication. And I told the doctor, I said, I'm really sensitive to medications, as I always have to tell them. Actually, the nurse. And I said, will you please give this to me very slowly, really low doses slowly? And she said, okay, sure. I didn't even really want the pain med, I don't think. And literally just drops, or close to drops as possible. And I said, "Yep, well, the walls are spinning and I'm nauseous now and everything else." I gave her all the list of symptoms, and she's like, "Those are all the lists of the side effects of this medication." And I said, "Yeah, I'm basically feeling overdosed from very low doses." And so, from my perspective, and I'm sure yours as well, in the data, is that maybe a drip would be a little bit safer for some of these things. And I'm not a doctor, but common sense says maybe put these drugs, which is what they are, drugs, chemicals, into humans maybe a little bit slower, just in case, right? And so we've got the Taco Bell incident. We've got a 12-year-old child, about 12 years old, getting these quick doses of medications with Regland in it, leading to side effects when it would have been preferable to do lower dose, according to the
Well,
data.
how did that young man do after that?
He eventually recovered, thankfully. He's doing well now. There's a video I can share of him kicking his legs, and it's absolutely heartbreaking to see. And his dad sitting there trying to comfort him, and there's not much comfort you can receive when you're in akathisia, but he's doing better now, thankfully. I think he's fully functional. So,
Well, that little point you just made is a valuable piece of information for the general public, and certainly for the tardive dyskinesia public, which we've already identified
yeah,
includes a million people. And by that, what I mean is that that young man started having movements, involuntary, abnormal movements of his legs. And the thing about tardive dyskinesia is the most common presentation has to do with involuntary tongue darting or mouth grinding. But other muscles in the body are also affected by tardive dyskinesia.
when I have
Uh,
severe tardive, my arms go back like this and above my head, and I'll go like this and going like that and leaning over like this. Just a whole bunch of horrible things. It's
right.
terrible. Yeah.
So that young man had his legs moving. Another way it can manifest is affecting the diaphragm muscles, which operate to help you breathe. Your diaphragm goes down, you fill your lungs. Your diaphragm comes up, you expel air from your lungs. But if your diaphragm has been affected, your whole respiratory system is screwed up because it's involuntarily moving on its own as a result of the effect to dopamine sensors in the brain. So Reglan was marketed as an acid reflux drug. It was promoted as the greatest thing since sliced bread, because before that, the way to treat acid reflux was antacids. I mean, you could take Tums or similar simple ass acid if you have acid reflux. Then they developed a type of drug known as an H2 blocker, which reduces the amount of acid that your body produces, less acid getting up into your esophagus. The reason it's important, you don't want to leave acid reflux untreated, because if you get acid coming up into your esophagus, it causes damage to the lining of the esophagus, and then can move on to esophageal cancer.
Yes.
So acid reflux is an important injury that needs to be treated, and it can be treated with drugs that ultimately can cause tardive dyskinesia if you use it only short term. And in fact, when it comes to Reglan, when the FDA finally approved Reglan, they limited it to 12 months use. But the company that was distributing it in the United States, uh, at an executive meeting, said to themselves, it cost us a lot of money to buy the rights to distribute metoclopramide in the United States. If we can only sell it for 12 weeks, we're going to lose money. So what we need to do is figure out a way to do a study to show that actually it's safe a lot longer than 12 weeks. And they purported to do a study. They brought in gastroenterologists who were wanting to use Reglan and to treat patients, and they told the panel of gastroenterologists that they were going to hire and pay to put patients on metoclopramide for long term. And indeed, they studied 200 and some odd patients and kept them on Reglan for over 2 years, claiming it was a great study. No one got sick. Well, that's because the people who did get symptoms, they threw them out of the study. Now, if that sounds totally stupid, of course it is, but mostly it's inaccurate, false, and misleading. And that's where the civil justice system has the ability to hold people civilly accountable if they knowingly abuse the system to promote something as safe, when studies from other countries around the world had already shown, for example, the Australian FDA equivalent published notice to doctors throughout Australia, metoclopramide will cause tardive dyskinesia if you use it long term. And they looked at a British study, the Australian group did, as I recall it. Now I'm doing this by memory now because I don't have my notebook with me.
So for everybody listening, if he makes any mistakes, make sure you Google it, because we're live doing this, so occasional mistakes will happen for the data, but we will do our best. And before you do that, somebody did ask a question, which I'll respond to really quickly. Is Alpha Siger, I believe is your name. I've talked to him before in my chat. He's one of my subscribers on YouTube here, and he wanted to know how many people have been harmed by this. And we mentioned a little bit earlier, is that from what we know as of today, the people that are alive today have about 500,000 people have tardive dyskinesia. That's correct, and it's probably more than that.
Yes, and another couple of 100,000 in overlapping Venn diagrams. If you imagine a Venn diagram, where, because those two groups overlap with each other. There are people who have tardive dyskinesia and no akathisia, and there are people who have akathisia and no tardive dyskinesia, but there's an overlap group that has both tardive dyskinesia and tardive akathisia. So
I've got both.
that's part of the formula. And those are the people who actually have the disorder. How about their partner, their spouse, their child, their mother, father, uncle, aunt, people who are part of their vibrant family, whoever that might be, and now those people are no longer able to effectively communicate with this important person in their life. So likely there are, I don't know, 5 or 10. Now this is a speculative guess, but 5 or 10 million people who either have it or have a partner, a loved one, an aunt, an uncle, a mother, a child that has it. And all of those people have suffered as a result of drug companies knowing and intentional lies aimed only at increasing their profit.
And speaking of the word increasing, I would say that this is increasingly becoming one of the biggest concerns in America today, amongst other things that all the things that are going on in America. I'd have to say that these medications are one of the biggest concerns in history, to be quite honest with you. Very, very dangerous, in my
Now,
opinion.
what I learned in pursuing this and bringing, for one thing, the medical community and the patient community were essentially misled to believe that if you have tardive dyskinesia, there's nothing you can do to hold Big Pharma accountable. And that's because Big Pharma made it as tough as possible to hold them accountable, going back to approximately 1994. I might have the date wrong by a year, but in approximately 1994, George Bush Jr. Was elected and inaugurated as governor of Texas. Now, on the day following his inaugural address, he called a special session of the Texas legislature, heavily Republican Texas legislature. And he said to the legislative body, "I've called you back today for a very special meeting. We need to take action to stop the epidemic of lawsuits against drug companies. The epidemic," he claimed, "of frivolous lawsuits against drug companies." And he right then and there presented a proposed bill to the Texas legislature that had been initially drafted about a year earlier by the Heritage Foundation, the right-wing legal group that supports Big Pharma and the Rifle Association and big banks. And what ultimately I was able to uncover by pursuing this, demanding production of documents, taking depositions. I mean, this has been an ongoing project since then, but we've been able to show that the pharmaceutical industry, by their own data, spends $150 billion a year, making it challenging, if not impossible, to hold Big Pharma accountable for drug-induced injuries. And that bill that the Heritage Foundation drafted and that the George Bush Republican Texas legislature passed on the same day. He presented it to them on the day. They passed it that day. He said this was really important. And guess what? The next day, the Michigan legislature, where there was a Republican governor, a heavily Republican Michigan legislature, passed the same bill, word for word, as adjusted in any way if it were needed for under Michigan law. And within the next year, essentially every legislative body in all 50 states, almost all 50 states, adopted legislation that would make it difficult, if not impossible, to hold a drug company accountable for a pharmaceutical injury. I had the good fortune, because of terrific local co-counsel, local partners of my own to bring a case in Texas, which, because of that fairly uniform approach, the trial court dismissed, but it went on appeal to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, a federal court of appeals, often thought of as the most conservative appellate court in the country. And but because I had wonderful teammates that were working with me for a long time, because I had been able to get so many documents and interior text messages and emails and things like that, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals basically said in the, I believe it was the Schwartz, whoops, sorry. I believe it was the client's name was Schwartz, and I'm apologizing if I've got that wrong. But if you do a legal search for tardive dyskinesia in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, you'll find that the Fifth Circuit basically said to the drug company defendants, what are you talking about? Your argument makes no sense. On the one hand, you say one thing, and then you turn around and you say something completely opposite. So they sent it back to go to trial in the district court in Texas, and the district court, thankful to I had partners from the University of from North Carolina. They were leading plaintiff lawyers in North Carolina, and we got the Court of Appeals to send it back, and then the trial judge awarded a seven-figure sum, which I'm not allowed to tell you how much it was.
Is that the 2014 case? I'm looking on Google trying to find one. There's another one from 2010. There's quite a few, actually, for tardive.
I'm looking for Schwartz is my client's name.
Schwartz. Not Schwarzenegger. Schwartz. Thanks.
Yeah, right. not Schwarzenegger.
Schwartz.
I believe, yeah. But I'm doing this by memory.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just trying to Google it while we're talking. If you don't mind me going back, we talked about Schwartz, and I'm sure there's more to talk about. Schwartz Pharma Inc. That's Google.
Oh, well, actually, that's a Schwartz Pharma Inc. Is one of the companies that took over for the original drug company, American Home Products, or A.H. Robbins. That's my memory.
Victor Schwartz?
Who?
Victor Schwartz?
I don't think so.
Huh. There's so much on Schwartz on Google. It's strange. Anyway, I'd like to go back before we get too sidetracked here. I can take a note where we were talking. Our brains are just going to naturally go all over the place, and I guess that's fine. That's weird. SWRT.
Mine naturally goes all over the place. That's part of my disability.
Yeah, you have a low-grade dementia, right?
I do. I have a low-grade frontal temporal dementia. I'm expected to give a talk of about 45 minutes to an hour, but short-term memory of names and nouns has lost me. And all of my documents, 120 boxes of them, were in a storage facility that wrongfully disposed of them even after they had promised me that they would preserve them. So my data is nowhere in my possession, but law students anywhere would be able to find the cases. So basically, 98% of everything that I'm saying is something that was developed in an actual case decision. I just can't put my hands on it right now.
Yeah, and frustratingly, some of the stuff that you talk about, like you can't even mention numbers that came out of some of these cases and stuff. It's like, to an extent, we have to just trust your word. But almost 90, like you
Well,
said,
no, you don't. No, you don't have to trust my word. All you have to do is find my cases, and here's
yeah.
where I'm trying to work with University of Washington Law School and Seattle University Law School to assign a student to do a research project and look for my name on
Oh, that would be
cases in
wonderful.
history.
That would be absolutely wonderful. If by any off chance, I'll put this on TikTok and Instagram if I remember to. If there's anybody in Washington, is it Washington University specifically?
No, it's the
Or could it be
University of
University?
Washington.
University of Washington.
Washington University is in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay. So does it have to be
But
that university, University of Washington specifically?
no, it doesn't. In fact, I'm looking to contact Joyce Vance, a former federal prosecutor who's at the University of Alabama as a professor, and she will know exactly how to put people on it to identify the entire body of case law that I've been involved in. And similarly, former federal prosecutor Barbara Atchison, a former federal prosecutor in Michigan, can be connecting with the University of Michigan Law School. And there are 3 or 4 different people at the University of Michigan Law School who are well capable of putting together a student internship program. And ultimately, that's what I did at American University, Washington College of Law. I got our law school there at AU to create a law student in court program. And as a result of that, we had 3 Washington, D. law schools who had law students who took the pharmacy law class and represented tenants in landlord-tenant court. And now, Michigan is one of the very key and most important states in the upcoming election. And one of the people that I learned so much about the pharmaceutical product liability litigation is a Michigan lawyer by the name of Deborah Atkinson. I worked with Deborah for quite
Linda.
a while. Linda, pardon me. See,
I remember.
there's where, yeah, Linda Atkinson, and she is immediate past president, I think, of the Michigan Trial Lawyers Organization, and so Barbara Atchison and her contacts, Joyce Vance and her law students, and Linda Atkinson would be a terrific source if you want to hold Big Pharma accountable. There isn't anyone that I know who's had more effective experience doing that than Linda Atkinson.
Yeah. So while we're on the discussion, I want to bring this back real quick. Is that if anybody is in school to be an attorney and you would like to do a paper on Ralph's work and do some research on tardive dyskinesia at the same time, there are literally hundreds of documents for you to do a paper on Ralph and bring a lot of information to the public and probably build an entire career off of tardive, because somebody needs to um, bring Ralph's work to the next step in the future and keep continuing to hold people accountable. So for anybody watching on TikTok or YouTube or wherever I post this, if you would like to write a paper with Ralph's work, definitely reach out to myself if you need to. And you said which university again was it that would have likely access to this information?
Well, the Alabama University of Alabama Law School for Joyce Vance, former prosecutor Joyce Vance. She appears regularly on MSNBC.
Let's
Or
say
the University of Michigan Law School. Barbara Atchison, former U.S. attorney, who also appears regularly on MSNBC. But Seattle University Law School or University of Washington Law School.
would University of Washington, you were correlated with them, right? Were you teaching there or something?
I did. After graduating law school in D.C., I ended up coming out to Washington. I was asked to law clerk for the Chief Justice of the Washington State Supreme Court. And after completing that 1 year clerkship, I actually stayed around for a while and worked with other law clerks who stayed on with Justice Hamilton.
I just got a really interesting comment. I have to cut you off on this because we've had a discussion on this before. Is Alpha responded on YouTube and he said this is sort of like the whole situation with the concussion thing in football. And funny enough, the people that were involved in the concussion movie and the case with that as well, weren't you?
Well, yes, I was. I set up. I had created a nonprofit organization, first for Dalcon Shield victims when I had the first Dalcon Shield case. That was called the International Dalcon Shield Education Association, a 501c3 organization pulled together by 6 or 8 of my clients who had tardive dyskinesia from the Dalcon Shield. But then I ended up putting together a nonprofit foundation on behalf of several clients of mine who had tardive dyskinesia. And that was called the International Dalcon Shield Education Association. No, see, I'm going back to the other one. The Conti Foundation. That's I'm sorry. Me for my confusion.
You started the International Dalcon Association?
Well, the Dalcon was called the International Dalcon Shield Education Association. The acronym IDEA. This was our idea for trying to make things better. But then when it came to tardive dyskinesia, I worked with some outstanding people and one of the leading nonprofit organization lawyers in the country, an Asian fellow whose name I'm blanking on. I think his law firm was Axion. I'm sorry that I'm forgetting his name right now, but that's part of my short-term memory disability. And he did nonprofits for many dozens of Democratic candidates for office. If they would put together a support group, he helped people put together nonprofits uh, around the country. And a brilliant guy. I'm really apologetic and embarrassed that I can't remember his name, but I could look it up, I think, in my phone thing
Yeah,
and add it later.
sure.
But in any event, um, drug-induced injuries
Speaking of that,
affect
if you
millions of people.
yeah, it affects millions of people. And there's one case in particular I'd like to go back to while it's still in my notes and on my mind is the Taco Bell incident, because it sounds so ridiculous that somebody had Taco Bell and suddenly they've got a brain injury and it leads to a horrible incident. So this is like something you'd hear of somebody dying because of a vending machine falls on them, but this is worse, and it's actually more common than vending machines. This is actually happening to a lot of people, myself included, with some injuries. So if you don't mind actually just going through the Taco Bell case and what happened to the guy, unfortunately. Um,
Well, I hadn't wanted to mention the exact chain name, and maybe we
oh
could
boy.
maybe we could redact that. But
Yeah, I'll cut that out.
what happened, but actually,
Well, Taco Bell's not held accountable,
well,
so they're
I
fine.
mean, I think of it this way. Actually,
Sure.
they don't deserve the protection that they bargained for. Basically, ultimately, what was said. I had 40 different cases that went up to a week or two before a trial, and then the drug company settled for what my clients demanded, because they have given up attempting to uh, defend against me if I'm saying that you didn't give an adequate warning to any of these patients. Because if you have tardive dyskinesia, it means you didn't get an adequate warning. You wouldn't have been on anything long enough to cause it if you had been given an adequate warning. So, and right now, my entire income um, was as a result of COVID, an injury that I assigned to Donald Trump for his totally inadequate um, dealing with the COVID uh, pandemic, and indeed, my next step in only maybe a week or two is to bring a lawsuit against Donald Trump here in the state of Washington, where I've gotten not that I've set up, but I've gotten the courts to give me rulings that would enable me to hold Donald Trump accountable for my personal COVID injuries. And I don't mean the very recent COVID hospitalization I had last week, and have only been out of the hospital for 3 or 4 days now. But going back to when the courts, pardon me,
Yeah.
when the courts shut down as a result of COVID around the country, um, all of my litigation, which was, I had millions of dollars that should have been coming my way for cases that had been settled, but I wasn't able to get any of that money because the courts shut down. And so, and my own personal health, not with COVID, but other health anomalies, or if that's the right word, health consequences as a result of not getting the treatment and the resources I needed to bring myself back to doctors who were treating me. I could no longer afford to go to doctors. I couldn't buy food. I had to use a local food bank to survive, and I'm in debt about $5 million, all of which would have come in and been paid. I have experts who are unpaid. I have lots of people, co-counsel, who have not been paid. There are a lot of people that I owe money to that I haven't been able to pay because the inadequate, false, and misleading statements of Donald Trump caused the courts to shut down.
5 million? Is this new info for me?
Well, I don't know, but it's money that I owe to a combination of people. I
Oh,
have
really?
several I have several experts who were promised money because the case was coming up for settlement in the next week or so, and they always ended up paying what my clients demanded.
We'll
Um,
talk about that more sometime on the phone, and then maybe we'll do it live. Um, yeah, we'll talk
yeah,
about that later and bring it forward more. So if we can go to the
we've been all
meal,
over, haven't we?
yeah, I'll bring it back for us. If we could
Okay.
talk about the meal that this guy had at a particular restaurant. So
Well, okay.
back for
So he had a meal. It made him nauseous. He went to a local emergency room. They injected metoclopramide intravenously without using a saline drip to administer it over a 5 or 10 or 15-minute period. I think 15 minutes is what they were looking for. And then they sent him home with a prescription for a few days of oral metoclopramide tablets. Well, he developed akathisia, and it was driving him crazy. Um, and he just it was total relentless a- anxiety, and you can tell us a little bit about what akathisia's anxiety is, um, but he ended up attempting suicide, and it was unsuccessful. He took a bunch of medication. Off the top of my head, I don't remember it, but it's in the case. Um, and he tried to kill himself. Well, he was saved. He didn't successfully kill himself, and they said, "Okay, you're doing better. Do better." And he continued to struggle with it for a while, and maybe a year later, he attempted suicide again. Once more, it was unsuccessful. Someone found him in time, and brought him in, and calmed him down in one way or another. And then about a year after that, and forgive me if my timing isn't right, but about a year or so after the second unsuccessful attempt, he put a shotgun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. And that's the torture of akathisia. But he is not alone. There are many, many, many people who have committed suicide as a result of akathisia. One of the first reported cases was a physician, a competent, intelligent U.S. physician. It's searchable on the internet, and he ended up committing suicide, and it was one of the first akathisia cases that was written up in published literature.
Thanks for sharing that. The first documented case, akathisia. This is AI here. First documented description of a syndrome resembling akathisia has been attributed to the British physician and anatomist Thomas Willis. This is like 1600s. Maybe that's a little bit too far back for that. And then akathisia was coined from the Greek word literally "not to sit" by Lad Haskovec, 1902, to describe two patients. I'm just trying to find it while I'm
Yeah.
talking just for fun, I guess. I guess you want to
Yeah.
call it fun. Um, yeah, I'd have to do some research. I'll do that. We're all documented, so we can do this in the future. Um, so you said a physician was actually one of the first to develop akathisia. Is that what you're saying
That's my recollection
from your record?
of it. But I know that there are examples in the literature of physicians who have been driven to suicide by akathisia.
Okay, yeah, like I don't
So,
know.
I mean, the drug companies always want to, just like with the gun shootings, it's always the crazy person,
Yeah,
one of
yeah,
those weird, crazy people.
yeah.
Really, how did that person get weird and crazy? Did they start off that way? No, they were drug induced.
Yeah, if you look at a lot of these cases, I've read into the forensics and reached out to another forensic scientist that specializes in cytochrome P450 to try and learn more about these medications causing these murder cases. I used to, back in the day, kind of scratch my head thinking, how can somebody be such a terrible person and shoot up a school? Only to get older and to learn that medications are literally making these people do things that they don't want to do, literally evil things from a medication. And so before we judge all of school shootings, I think, I hate to say this, but one of the first questions that we should be asking is, which medication was this person on that made them shoot up the school or shoot up whatever place that they did? Because I think it's a lot more common than we realize, and everybody's making them look like the crazy people. But I'm sure to an extent, yes, there's some sin in their lives and everything else, and it's not always medications, but there are medication-induced shooting cases that we know. And how many medications make some guy grab a shotgun and kill himself? So before people go and completely judge these shooters, which we should judge, but know that medications are in the system a lot of the time in these people's bodies.
Well, that may well be so. And I certainly wouldn't quarrel with that. And I think it's likely that there is data to support it.
Yeah,
On the other hand, one of my cases, in fact, the Conti versus Park Davis case, makes the point
sure.
that, and this is a real important point. If Donald Trump, I think undeniably disseminates inaccurate, false, and misleading information to blame the people for causing harm, and the Conti versus Park Davis case basically stands for the proposition that if you issue an inaccurate, false, and misleading statement, which or with reasonable diligence should know is false and misleading, and if because of the person you are, when you say things, people will follow you, like Donald Trump. When Donald Trump says this, that, or something else, hang Hillary, or hang Pence, or if you say something and you're a person whose word will be followed because of your celebrity, then you have to use reasonable care to not say something that is inaccurate, false, and misleading, and that would inspire someone to commit a crime to support your need, where you say, kill him. Although he always kind of twists it a little bit, where he doesn't say directly kill him, but people are saying things he would say, and you have to put those concepts together to literally hold Donald Trump accountable for 1 million people who died from COVID.
Yeah, and I just want to mention this, is kind of off the top of my head, is that when these medications trick somebody's mind into thinking these horrible things, and then the politics get involved and they get very passionate about the politics, and suddenly they're having intrusive thoughts to do things that they shouldn't be doing. um, they should maybe consider that some of their thoughts and feelings might be enhanced overly to the highest extent from these drugs, telling them to do things that they know that they shouldn't be doing. So before they even consider it, remember what is in their bloodstream and what's in their heart as well. And so if they're on drugs, be vigilant and sober minded. Our adversary, the devil, is running around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And he wants to devour not only your life, but the lives around you. So be very careful before you go and do something that you will inevitably regret eternally, not just down here. And it may not even have entirely been you that wanted to do it to begin with. So resist it as much as humanly possible. Just for those that are listening live,
Yeah.
something
Well, I
might.
personally am. I don't want to issue statements myself
Yeah.
uh, that blame harm on the devil. Um, I,
Well, ultimately, somebody can only.
from my perspective, I want evidence, I want facts, I want truth.
You
If
know.
evidence, facts, and truth show that there is a scientific explanation, then there's where I will say we as a community of people, as society, can hold wrongdoers accountable, and it's you will be held accountable if you're a person who people will follow if you issue inaccurate, false, and misleading statements that you know or reasonably should know are false and misleading.
Yeah.
And the case law is there, and it would apply throughout the United States on a state law basis under state law, wherever people live anywhere in the United States. That's why I say that there are maybe 1 million or 2 million people who have suffered in one way or another from COVID, who have a viable legal claim under the civil system of state law in any county of the United States where they may live.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna take a 60-second restroom break here, or whatever. And I've got a list of random questions that I have saved up on my Notion. If you don't mind me asking you them, and we'll go from there and maybe wrap up a little bit, since it's been an hour and a half. But we always talk much
Right.
longer. Yeah, I'm gonna take a real quick break. Wait, what did this guy say? That is what the
Okay.
court cares about, right? Facts, science, and proof is what Alpha said. He's making some sarcasm here. The courts really care about the facts, the science, and the proof. Well, the courts, I'm sure, a lot of times try to, based on your experience. It's just the companies that might have a little bit more leverage, I'm assuming. I'll be right back and go to the restroom. And if you feel like responding while I'm gone, go for it. But yeah, I'll be back in a second. So
Okay. I'm trying to look at that note.
yeah, go for it.
Well, I see that Alice Singer, I hope I'm saying it right, um, makes a comment that this is sort of like the whole situation with concussions uh, thing in football. And yes, um, the um, the concussion syndrome for football players um, uh, scientifically has been known for a long time. A dear friend and long term colleague of mine um, is a woman who had a a closed head concussion from an automobile accident. And in fact, a car came up through a stop sign and ran into her on a motorbike. Um, she was knocked to the ground, um, brought to the nearby hospital. Um, and they did studies of her brain and told her, "Well, you're okay. It didn't cause any internal bleed. There's no evidence in your brain of any damage. You'll probably be confused for a while, but give it a couple of weeks and it'll go away." Well, it didn't go away. Indeed. Um, it seemed to get worse. And her name is Constance Miller, and she is currently the remaining board member of the Conti Foundation, which I mentioned before, a nonprofit foundation aimed at holding big pharma accountable for drug-induced tardive dyskinesia or akathisia. But back then, 25 years ago or more, Constance had this brain injury that was told to her not to worry, you'll be well in a couple of weeks. But she would get in her car to go to the grocery store, and she'd be driving for a little while, and she couldn't remember where she was going or why. And then she had challenges to get home. She had lost significant amounts of executive function within her brain. So Constance was known to me. She was one of the women among 8 or so or 9 who were on the board of directors of the Dalcon Shield the Dalcon Shield Sufferers Foundation, and she ended up connecting with psychiatrists, leaders in the country, and she studied closed head injury, and her results were written in a book, Rising from the Ashes. And her book was the feature conversation at halftime in Super Bowl 14 by the first NFL player to talk during a 14-minute segment of that Super Bowl, or maybe a 12-minute segment, as to how he developed executive function loss as a result of banging his head too many times. And he said, were it not for this book, Rising from the Ashes, he might have headed on to commit suicide.
Who is that author again?
Pardon?
Who is the author of that again?
Constance Miller.
Constance Miller. Thanks.
And Super Bowl 14, I'm pretty sure was the year, but all date things are a challenge for me.
Yeah. I think this one's called From the Ashes, a head injury self-advocacy guide.
Yeah, does it say Rising from the Ashes?
I don't see that one yet. Let me look.
No, From the Ashes is her book, I think.
Oh, okay. I don't think it says Rising, but it does say From the Ashes.
From the Ashes. Say the rest of the title.
Yeah, let me get back to it. From the Ashes, a head injury self-advocacy guide by Constance Miller and Kay Campbell.
Oh, yes, sure. Remember that now. Yes. Kay Campbell helped her work on it. And basically, what she's saying to people with some sort of a head injury, um, here are what you need to do is create lists. You have to document what you're doing. And if your intention, for example, is to go to the grocery store, well, say, go to the grocery store and buy and write down what it is that you need, because your brain will have trouble remembering it, but you've got it on a note. So it's a study manual for people with brain injury.
Like, I should get this for myself, to be honest with you, because of my BMX accident. And you guys probably see me typing while I'm on here. I take some notes myself. I learned that at a young age. I was meeting a man from the organization Recovery Park, I believe was the organization. It's been so long. And he complimented me for actually doing it, whereas others told me, a psychiatrist told me I was OCD. But the man from Recovery Park noticed I was taking notes because I have difficulty memorizing things on the spot. And so he was very kind to compliment me instead of be a psychiatrist and say that I'm OCD. Like, no, difficulty memorizing, but thanks. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, I took notes for that.
Okay, so you've got some questions you wanted to ask me, and then I'd like to wrap it up for tonight.
Sure. Let's see. Notes. Where did it go? Maybe I'll ask this too. If someone goes to a hospital, like in my case, or anybody's case, for akathisia, but the doctor doesn't write down that they treated them for akathisia, what type of legal issue is that, if you don't mind me asking? It's just kind of a random question, because I'm sure a lot of people out there that go into hospitals for akathisia are not being documented for having it for billing reasons and coding issues and other things. So let's say they are allegedly treated but don't get it documented that they had akathisia. What should they be? Or what is that falling under?
Well, the basic concept of liability and accountability are simple concepts of tort law that have been with us for many centuries. And basically, all professional people, in fact, all people, all human beings have a duty to use reasonable care to avoid causing harm to others. So, what would reasonable care be under the circumstances? All right. If you as a patient, and let's assuming we're going back in history, not many years after it happened, where statute of limitations would likely bar any lawsuit. But what patients in general should be doing is always request copies of your medical records from your hospital stay, whatever they are. And you want the whole records. That's all. It's a simple request. And nowadays, in many states, I know this is true in Washington, and I think it's generally true, that they can only charge reasonable costs to give you a set of records, and not say, oh, well, it's $1.50 a page and you've got 3,000 pages.
In a loophole, your doctor can get these records possibly for free for you. Also,
well, I mean, you should ask your doctor, you should ask the hospital, you should ask your primary care doctor, could you please send me a copy of my records? your doctor should send you. You don't have to tell them why you want them or what you're going to do with them. You're a patient. He's been treating you. Nowadays, every time, in my case, in Washington state, we always get notice that this has been put into your medical record chart. And you can go online and you could see your entire medical chart, and you want to do what you have to download it and have it as a document without regard to whether anything's happened. But in the future, if anything does happen, now you've got your records. And when under my protocol for filing lawsuits, if your review of your records and you're taking them to a lawyer to say, here's what happened to me, here are the side effects or the traumas or the whatever that I've experienced, here are my medical records. Would you help me determine if the doctor, the hospital, the specialist, whatever, use reasonable care to evaluate and treat the condition that I have? What must the drug company do if you have an injury that was caused by a drug? Well, a drug company has to use reasonable care to identify any hazard in any of the medications or treatments that you received. What is a hazard? A hazard is a set of circumstances that could cause harm. And how do you find out all of the possibilities? Well, what I've learned, and this is with great assistance and benefit from Linda Atkinson and her partner, is you maybe go to patent searches and you look into patent search. A lawyer would do this. This is not the type of work that the patient is able to do. But if the patient knows, I've got this serious adverse effect and I was in the hospital, now you need a lawyer to investigate what might have caused it. And if the lawyer finds a similar drug that has a similar problem, that's an insight as to what the problem might have been. Then the drug company has to use reasonable care to evaluate the risk. What's the likelihood with this treatment that I would have sustained this injury? And whatever that risk is, under the principles that I call the Harry Philo principles or the Linda Atkinson principles, is you do everything that is economically feasible and scientifically feasible to reduce the risk. Is there anything that you could do to reduce the risk? Now, for example, the risk of tardive dyskinesia or tardive akathisia from metoclopramide or brand name Reglan, there isn't anything you can do that a scientist could do to make that risk smaller, except give you an adequate warning before you're on the medication to know, by the way, this we think will help you. It only should be used for a short-term basis. Here are the symptoms that you should look for, and you should tell your close ones, the people who see you on a regular basis, if you see me making any movements that seem abnormal, let me know, because then I want to call my doctor right away and say, my friend, my wife, my partner, my husband is having or he told me that I'm having these symptoms. What should I do? And then the doctor will wean you off the drug slowly, because a quick withdrawal will actually exacerbate the likelihood of developing the side effect.
Yeah,
So
we've got people that have
there's a
been.
way of studying it so that you get the benefit of an adequate warning and prompt treatment if things develop that are causing you harm.
Dr. Whit Doring on YouTube is a good doctor that discusses how ripping people off of medications too quickly can cause brain injuries, which can, in some cases, be permanent or very, very long term, and is not advised. A couple questions from Alpha Siger. One is, yes, is not documenting the treatment malpractice. So if somebody doesn't document anesthesia, is that malpractice?
Well, likely it is. Yes,
Isn't that
most
technically
likely
fraud?
it is. Pardon?
Isn't that technically fraud if they bill for something else and not the condition that they went in for?
Well, if they treat them for something else, that is negligence. I mean, if you're there but did the doctor know that the patient had akathisia? Did the patient say, hey, I'm here because I'm told I have these symptoms, which are akathisia? Or I've been having these symptoms, what should I do? Well, the doctor then has to do a proper evaluation to figure out what your symptoms are and what. I keep on losing you there, but
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Oh, your laptop calms down a little. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a psychiatrist that is likely going to go to jail. I'd be very, very surprised if he doesn't go to jail, or rather prison, for what he did. He fraudulently billed my insurance for medical conditions that I don't have, put down conditions that had nothing to do with me having akathisia, and later turned out that this guy had been doing it to a lot of patients, and pre-signing.
When did he screw up for you?
2022-ish. Always these limitations, but an attorney did say that there's a chance that I could sue this guy, and one recommended that I sue him before he gets into prison. So I'd like to try and figure that one out. I just haven't found any fraud attorneys that work on the patient side versus the doctor side. So I'd like to get this guy, get a lawsuit.
I don't think you need a fraud attorney.
The one attorney I talked to that you talked to as well, they didn't want to work on the case, and they said try fraud.
Right.
But
we haven't identified the right attorney yet, but I think that a medical negligence attorney would be able to do the job.
Yeah. So what I should be doing is getting to a couple doctor's appointments and call an attorney again and see what they can do. And then Alpha Siger, again, one last question from him. Then I might ask you one more before we go. I know we're both getting sleepy here. He said, can lawyers help you get medical help? And I think I can actually answer that is that typically aren't lawyers going to look for medical professionals to help the patient if they have been harmed? Aren't they going to start looking for experts?
It depends. If it's an akathisia or a tardive dyskinesia injury, then I believe that I have a qualified list of experts in each of the relevant fields whose testimony is already on the record and reusable in new cases because I was able to get them documented in that way. And I literally believe that if it's tardive dyskinesia or tardive akathisia, and a local lawyer who has experience with medical malpractice so that he knows how to talk to doctors, will be able to talk to treating doctors about their potential accountability as a treater who didn't take the steps necessary to evaluate what the patient's condition was and how to properly treat them.
Yeah, and I
So,
noticed there are like forensic psychiatrists and forensic neurologists, which work on court cases mainly and not actually seeing patients. So I'm assuming that in some cases, attorneys are going to be reaching out to them and having their clients evaluated by those specialists, and then those forensic specialists would be speaking during the court cases about their findings of the patient and their side effects. And that's kind of what happened to me without the court aspect, is when I hired.
yeah, well, in the beginning of my litigation, going back over 40 some years, really, um, in the beginning, what I had to do is find the forensic psychiatrists, the gastroenterologists, the neurologists, the all of those people, and I did it by um, looking for published literature. And when I would find literature that had anything to do with tardive or akathisia, I would contact the authors of that article. And I was blessed to be able to have both a law degree, an active legal practice, and a pharmacy degree. So if I'm calling a doctor to ask about, or if I'm citing a doctor in a complaint, I also have the 42-page list of questions that the drug company will always ask. They will search into every medical evaluation, treatment, or care you've ever had. They want to know every drug you've ever taken. They want the pharmacy records from every pharmacy you've ever gotten drugs from. So they want, and they have a specific list of questions about each of the different drugs. So in my proposal to move forward or to help 1 million or 2 million people move forward, since I have the exact set of questions that will be asked, well, what we do is the local lawyer who has a medical malpractice experience will have staff members who will help you answer. Sorry, that was my blood sugar signal. Will get answers to every question on that 42-page list of questions, so that when the complaint is filed, it's filed with a set of requests for admissions where you've answered every question they're ever going to ask, and you have each response certified by the provider who says, I've provided the following set of medical records to Brandon Laws, and this is a copy of every record I have for Brandon Law. I say so under oath. Well, now when the complaint is filed, you give them the answers to every question, and you say, please admit within 30 days that these are the true and correct answers of everything you've wanted to know. And if they deny it, they only get 30 days to answer. And with the request for admission, it's not like an interrogatory or request for production where they could say, well, we're looking for it, we need more time, it'll take more time. If you actually give the answer in a request for admission, then they get 30 days to say you're right or you're wrong. And if they want to say, no, we don't agree that that is the true and accurate response, and if once the records show that it was, then they owe you money for all of your legal expenses and wait for them to answer questions that should have been answered within 30 days. That's the power of a litigation tool called a request for admission.
Interesting. Request for admission. I'll write that down. And so I'm going to ask one last thing, just why not? And maybe next time we talk, I'd like to hear some stories about your wife, like you've told me before. I think some people would appreciate listening about your wonderful wife. Hang on one second.
Well,
I'm in an interview. Blocking face for attempting legal protection. I don't know, just kidding. So I'm going to ask you this question really quick, if you don't mind. I asked you it before. And so I asked, have you ever talked to any attorneys working for the pharmaceutical companies that are on the other side? So you're protecting the patient, and on the other side are the attorneys. And my question for you with them on the other side, do they know that they're lying in these cases? Do they know?
Do they know what?
Hang on here. I'm blocking your face. Hurry. Okay, it's funny, but not.
Well, your friend wanted to show me his face.
So, okay, so my question is this. Do the attorneys that are trying to defend pharmaceutical companies that have hurt people, do they know that they're lying when they're defending the companies? From your experience, have you seen them maybe hint that they know the truth, that the drugs did injure the patient or injure lots of people, hundreds of thousands of people? Are they aware when you're in these cases and maybe have talked to them off to the side? I know you mentioned that some of them know you by name, and I've always just wondered, I'm sure they do, but do they acknowledge in some way, shape, or form that, yeah, these drugs are hurting people, even though they're defending the other side?
Well, there's the attorney as an individual human being, and there's each of whom has a legal obligation to do everything they can to effectively represent their client, the drug company. And actually, the principal attorneys, the lead counsel for the drug companies, I'm thinking of, sorry, again, that's my blood sugar needing insulin.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to get off here in a minute.
Yeah. They actually have been very collegial and friendly with me. I have a habit. Anytime I have something that I want to talk to them about or call them, I call them up. We go by first name. And I always say, hi, Joe, it's Ralph. How are you today? And I end up saying that I'm declaring wonderful. And I always tell them I'm declaring wonderful. We communicate that way. But next time around, I maybe even could pull it up now. I could show you a picture of the lead counsel for one of the major pharmaceutical entities, the Teva. Let's see, was he Teva? Well, I had lawyers. We would talk friendly, and I've got a picture of the lead counsel. It's his personal cell phone picture that has a picture of him, an attractive looking young man with two beautiful kids that are right there in his cell phone picture. And that man, I'm confident, knows exactly that they weren't telling the truth. They were lying, and they cannot defend the truth anymore. They cannot seek to say, "Oh, we gave an adequate warning," because when the complaint is filed, it requires them to admit these are all the drugs that I got. These are all the doctors that I saw. These are all the medical records that are authentic and verified. And we're claiming that you didn't give an adequate warning to me, patient, or to you would be saying in your case, they didn't give an adequate warning to you, the patient, and require them to admit it within 30 days. And if they don't admit, then when the evidence shows, of course, that's true, then they also have to pay all of your attorney's fees from the time they denied the truth and accuracy of the statement. But they're not going to do that anymore because I'm saying that these cases are viable in state court in the county where you reside, anywhere in the United States. And in order to defend, they not only have to have their lead counsel, the people that I talk to, and but they also would then have to have local counsel in the county where you brought the case. Well, if there are 1 million cases spread out amongst the 2,700 or 2,800 or 2,900 county courts in the United States, it's somewhere in that neighborhood of people. They can't afford to hire counsel in an effort to say, "Oh, we gave inadequate warning," when of course they didn't. No one evaluated you. No one told, it didn't happen for any of these 2 million people who have tardive dyskinesia or tardive akathisia. So as a result, they're going to give up. They're ready to give up. They've told me, "We can't fight you, Ralph." They just think that that they've already eliminated all of the tardive dyskinesia cases because they got 25,000 people to sign a release that said, "You're paying me $3,000 to admit that you never gave me, that I claimed you had not given me an adequate warning, but now I admit that you did give me an adequate warning, and so I'm no longer going to hold you accountable." And I got $3,500 or so for admitting that I brought a claim that I cannot hold. And why? Because when the 25,000 cases were brought by 40 different law firms, they after 120 of them were dismissed on summary judgment, the lawyers said, "Hey, we can't do this anymore." And so they said to their clients, "We told you we would represent you. We filed a claim. They're saying that the law doesn't support it. We're willing to fight on your behalf, but you will have to cover the costs of moving forward." Ordinarily,
that's usually when the case closes, isn't it?
And so all of those clients gave up their claim for $3,500 or thereabouts. I could be off a little bit. To say, "I brought a claim. It wasn't a good claim. The court dismissed it, but I now let you go." But then there's the question of the generic company. Did the generic company give you an adequate warning? And the generic companies, particularly, and very particularly the generic lawyers representing the Teva pharmaceutical company, they claim that they gave an adequate warning and they were ready to to fight on, but the defense lawyers had 120 cases dismissed on summary judgment. So now your lawyer said, I'll continue to represent you, but you'll have to pay the costs and pay them as we go along. So those are people who have not yet been fully paid, but there's a but, and the but is that how do I put this? I have to give it a thought for a second. I lost my train.
I'm losing mine too.
In the state of Washington and in the state of Pennsylvania, I was sick, and my partner was also sick, and in the motions for summary judgment from the drug company, I missed one argument that they made, and as a result of failing to respond to that argument, the trial court granted them summary judgment. But the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said that we will that you're able, you Ralph, or your clients are able to bring an action in the to change the law. You can bring an action to change the law and show that they never gave an adequate warning. And basically, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, where I was co-counseled by a member of the Pennsylvania court who's on the steering committee for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and they're saying, okay, what you have to do now is ask the legislature to change the law, and we'll be able to change the law. So I don't think that last paragraph or two was articulated as cleanly as it should be, but I'll try to, before our next session, go back in and see if I can find some language to make it clear.
Yeah. So I guess I'd like to just thank everybody for tuning in for the stream. And I know this video will be edited into just a video to listen to in general. And your alarm is saying it's time for bed. But anyway, maybe the next time around, sometime you could give us some stories about life in general. I think that would be fun. I like listening.
Well, I've lived 82 years, so I mean, I have a little experience at it.
Yeah.
I'm aiming to stay alive for. My mother lived to 100 years and 6 months, and it was actually an inappropriately administered anesthesia when she had a hip surgery that basically put her down. So I'm shooting to at least stay even with her.
Yeah, Lord willing, that'd be great.
No kidding.
You talked about your wife being a dancer and having a very interesting lineage, and you guys had was it a motel, right? A motel, and
we had a bed and breakfast.
In Redmond
that was built like a hotel. It was built at the request of a woman who was married to a Swiss banker. And when he died, he and his wife had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. And when the Swiss banker died of a heart attack, there was a very wonderful obituary in local Seattle area papers, and she The survivor chose to do her mourning at her daughter's home, which was on 40 acres just above the 5 acres that our bed and breakfast was located.
Mm.
She decided she said to her uh, daughter and son-in-law one morning at a breakfast table where she was looking out towards Mount Rainier and the Cascade Mountains. It's a pretty area. If there's anything nearby that's available, I'll come out and build a summer cottage. Was Virginia Wild's story, and and it happens that the next door property was the one that my wife and I owned on a
Mhm.
reverse mortgage setting, and and we since the reverse mortgage company abandoned me, um, I had to the place got sold, and she built this thing. She was going to join with me and reinstate the bed and breakfast, where my plan was we could host a party of 150 people. We did that for my stepdaughter's wedding, um, and the plan was to uh, uh, reinstate it as a bed and breakfast, um, and let people stay the night before. The son, the oldest son of this woman, he was the team photographer for Seahawks, Sounders, and Mariners, and he was permitted. In fact, the Seahawks required him annually to auction the right to join him at the sidelines um, for every home game of either of those teams. And we were going to make it available for people to bring in a party of up to 150 people and have 3 luxury bedrooms with decks, with fireplaces, with skylights and things like that.
Wow.
And these 3 couples would get to join him at the sidelines, and the rest of the party would get the unused tickets in the luxury box, because the people who have the resources to buy a luxury box, don't worry about that. The people who have the resources to buy a luxury box, 40% of the time they don't show up. So with proper advanced planning, you could have your company party. You could have up to 150 people. They could all get seats at the next day's game, whatever it might be. And 6 of them would accompany on the sidelines. But the thing that I was negotiating with the fellow who was the team photographer is that we have to set it up so that 15% of our sideline tickets would go to people from the youth club or the boys and girls club, low income people who now would get to attend a soccer game or a Seahawk game. And remember, in 2 years, the World Cup is being played. So I'm hoping to get this whole plan reinstated and retake over the facility to operate as a bed and breakfast with people coming in for sporting events around the year.
So where was that? I'm curious if it's on Google Maps. And then,
It, well, this is with you and me and not online,
oh,
or
we're still online. We can do that privately then. We'll do it
yeah.
privately. Yeah, sure. Well, anyway, I guess that will be it for now. And then we can go over the live stream and decide if there's anything else we want to talk about. But anyway, Once again, thank you everybody that listened in. As I always like to say, be sure to hit like on this video like your life depends on it. Subscribe to my channel if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay motivated, you urban survivors. Grace and peace to you from God our Father and his Son, Jesus Christ. And once again, this was Ralph Pittle, an attorney of 40 years and 82 or 83 years now of life. And we'll definitely be talking.
I turned 82 in March of this year.
82 in March. And so we'll be back for some stories of just life in general, because I think he has some wonderful stories. Anyway.
I'm 6 months older than Joe Biden.
So, and you haven't tripped up any stairs or tripped it down any stairs, I should say, rather. So you're a little bit better than him.
I'm doing okay. Thank you all. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, everybody. God bless. See you guys later. Bye.
Thank you.
I will end the stream here for you.